this year's conference has congealed really in its own self-organizing basis, such as it is. And I'm glad. I'm glad we're together. Rick Muller had suggested after the Asilomar session, when he and Jeremy had come over here and visited the studio, and Rick said, well, you should just do that for your presentation, just do the sculpture. And I had thought since 2019 of videotaping something for a presentation. And then as we were rolling toward this year, as I was thinking of everything, and we have our conference theme that we all developed, the presence of the future in us. And take a deep breath. So I thought, well, the sculpture is it. The sculpture is it. We'll observe time in its various modalities as ably as we can. Obviously, if we're talking about the presence of the future in us, we might automatically assume we're talking about time in various ways. And my sculpture has as a key element time. And actually, there's a whole periodic chart, a periodic of temporics. Gebserians love that term. It's so wonderful, temporics. And so these sculptures are blends of various temporics. I realized over 20 years ago, it suddenly hit me, I will not live long enough to finish these sculptures. Well, that was 20 years ago, folks, and I've done a number of sculptures in the meanwhile, but there's still all this work. And then I thought, that's okay. I don't, that's all right. That's all right. Because when I'm working, time is, as I can say, malleable. Time is malleable. And I had to look up that term because I didn't know where it came from. And malleable is the cognate with mallet, hammerable, shapeable, like a blacksmith. So time is malleable in these sculptures, in the energy fields, in the very complex energy fields that are functioning. I've once said quantum wave generators. These sculptures are quantum wave generators, but then everything is a quantum wave generator. So, but there's the best we can do is a certain manner of speaking. But then as I work on these sculptures and think, am I working for posterity? Am I working for after my death? Who would even want these objects, which I don't even think of as objects? I think of them more as, again, quantum wave generators with malleable time modes. And but I let go of concerns about my personal life and death, if we put it that way, and just do the work and immerse myself in the work when I'm summoned to be in the work. And I think a way of how I've come, even in the last few days, to think of the James Webb images, the James Webb Space Telescope images. Now, to follow this through temporically, when we receive those new images from the James Webb Telescope, we all know, okay, these are light signals from billions of years ago. But we have never seen them before. So we are seeing these images now of then, and yet there are more images to come that we have not yet perceived, that the telescope has not received. They have not arrived to our awareness. So the deep past is still arriving in our future, if we want to use such sentimental terms as past and future. Now, those light patterns have been arriving all along. We just haven't been able to perceive them until we put up a James Webb Space Telescope to go further than we've ever gone before. And the sculptures arrive that way. They have a certain futurity. I don't use that word. There's something coming. And I know something is coming. I feel it in my heart, in my soul, in the marrow of my bones. Something is coming. Something is afoot. It's magical. It's archaic. It may also be mythic. And it involves certain mental functions as well to achieve the integration in the sculpture. Another major ingredient is gravity. I'm always very, very aware of gravity. I used to call this studio my 1G studio, meaning a studio in one gravity unit. So that, who knows, maybe someday these sculptures will be transported and will be in 0.75 gravity units. But right now they're in one gravity unit. I'm very concerned with bonding. I'm very concerned that the sculptures coalesce, that when I'm serving this cause, this theme that may appear, this impulse, and often it's catastrophic. Often I'm dealing with very heavy shadow material. And in fact, the sculpture I'm now going to put together for you is shadow material. We need to watch the video. Software?
He's demonstrating time wrapped in time very enigmatically. Thank you.
Fasten your seatbelt. Okay, so I started, this sculpture started, again, to say I started is really awkward. I mean, it started itself. You know, we all know that language, but it's true. It's just true. But I would collect driftwood, I should say, driftwood. And I found this piece of driftwood on the beach. It was actually a long timber. The bottom is truncated on the drawing. It was a long timber. And I immediately see these eyes. I'm always seeing eyes everywhere in the whole universe. And so I kept that piece of driftwood for, I don't know, 10, 15 years. And then it was like something needs to happen. And so I created this, I cut it and I shaped it. And it was sort of like a Kachina doll figure in a certain way. But I was not satisfied with it at all, right? I didn't know what was happening. I don't know much of what is happening about anything. So it started then to configure itself. I'll go over here, I'll turn it on, as that figure, which I just showed you. So you have that in your mind. You know, I'm going to show it to you again, just to refresh your imagination. So we go from the basic wood, looking to the little Kachina head type figure. And I looked at that and I thought, well, that's a sort of an idol, a nice little wooden idol. Am I an idol maker? Is that what I'm about? And then I thought, well, I guess so. I guess that's part of the myth. And so I was thinking of idols, and I started working, and I very quickly then was led to, I say, well, it's a household god. You know, compliments to Freud, compliments to whomever, and all kinds of compliments or whatever. Household gods. And then I thought, well, we all live with plenty of household gods. I believe that's a safe collective statement. So I just said, go with it. But then I thought, I can't title this piece Household God because I don't know for whom it might or might not be a god. And I also didn't want to, you know, like say something abrupt, like this sculpture is a household god. It seemed a little excessive. So I looked up and I was led to the term as a synonym for household god, ancestral figurine. And then I thought, wow, that's it. That's it. What I'm working with here is the creation of an ancestral figurine. I don't know why, but then there's so many whys as to why I would do that. So I started, and here we see, you can see the original Kachina doll base and the old plank back there. And then it started growing. Long before the mask appeared, long before, it was just the Kachina doll, and it started to grow. Then I knew I had to have a base. And so I moved to the base. I'm very drawn to Egyptian mythos energy fielding, and to, as some of you may know, the Djed, D-J-E-D, the most common household idol, if you want to put it that way, in ancient Egypt. This is a fragment of Osiris, the dismembered god. It's also the sacrum of a bull. These are like the lower vertebrae. I've always related to the Djed because I felt like I needed more backbone. And so I created the Djed at the very core of the piece as it began to form, and thought a good backbone is a good thing to have. And then the piece assembled itself as the household god. Face, then the piece, it all came together from all directions, simultaneously, all at once. It seems to me. At any rate, we have a basement here. We have a dungeon here, a basement area. Or no, this is the first floor with a refrigerator, a bed. This is the basement. My basement was a bit of a dungeon. And then we have an attic up here. And there are little miniature dooley-bobs that identify the refrigerator, the stove, you know, a pretty regular household with attic. And then with the figure, the ancestral figurine got a tongue, so with to speak, and then the crown and the third eye, and then the flames with a black sun, and that's what happened. Now, to build the foundation for this was the rest of the journey, and that I'm going to do with you now. Now, here's an image I only discovered much later of an 18th century physician. I only saw this after the figure had configured itself. That's an image. You know, I can email it to you if you want further study. So then I began working with this. So we have this figure, but a base. It had to be grounded, of course, based. And that's always a big challenge. And so then I thought, well, what is the most basic? And that is the archaic. So this appeared, maybe you can get the light through there, Gregory. This appeared as an opening to the archaic, the chthonic, the grounded, the earth powers. And so there's the base with the archaic, the descent into the unknown and the unknowable. The next layer, again, back to the Egyptian work, this throne, I have no idea why, but this throne configured itself based on a chair in Tutankhamun's tomb. I saw that exhibit, probably many or all of you did too. And this is like one of the chairs in Tutankhamun's tomb. It was a deep pleasure to make it something royal, something deep in my own personal sense of phylogenetic energies. Again, I can't explain. That's the beauty of the sculptures. I don't actually need to explain. And then becoming more personal in its ways for me. And I knew that the household had to have a hearth. And so I began building flames. And you'll see here a serpent in the flames. That's okay, you'll get that. Here's the serpent power, and the serpent winds around on the other side as well. So the serpent flame encloses the entire milieu here of the household grating, which it leads me to a dream, my very first dream. I've never forgotten it. It was a nightmare. I must have been about 6 years old. And it had to do with a fireplace and terribly powerful energy field. I hated that dream. I could tell no one. I was just a child. So here's more flame from the underworld, from hell. Sure, we're going to do my household, God. Hell's got to play a big role. Then even more flames here. you know, the flames of hell and the gates of hell and the gates of paradise all burn with the same fire, according to William Blake. And I agree with Brother Blake on that. So we got to have plenty of fire so we can feel the heat. It all fits together very snugly. So when I'm gone, if anybody wants to put it together, it only goes together one way. You can't put it together wrong, at least not in a very satisfactory way. So if you take long enough, somebody, a descendant, do I have a descendant who would ever want to reassemble our ancestry this way? I don't know. And then here is the mandala and appearing. So we have the archaic, chthonic, the mythic, the mental in all of these geometrical, the art figures, the serpent power. And I'm a devotee of serpent power. I don't kid around with that. I take that very seriously. Okay, here we go. Reassembling Osiris. But then there's more. As I was looking through the idol, the ancestral figurine, and thinking of all the shadow work that's loaded into this, I could cry. It makes me hurt. You know, what do I do about this? But this appeared as a dawning power, shall we say, in our own parlance, the integral. And it was, keep looking at this figurine, keep looking. And then when you've looked a lot, keep looking and look some more. And what appeared was the spiritual spirit bird descending, the spirit bird. We got that? And so it was, all will be integrated. As Jean Gebser tells us, all will be integrated. Even the deepest shadows. I do this right. See, it won't go together the wrong way. I have to remember myself. No, that is the right way. What is the right way? What is the wrong way? Okay. That's good enough. Okay. So there we see the numinous. We experience the numinous behind the terrifying and the deadly powers, which are also creative powers. So the creation and destruction are never separate. Creation and destruction, order and disorder are always simultaneous, or as Gebser says, at once. So I don't know how the future is arriving in this work, but I accept it and I receive it, and I share it with you. And that's the end. It's the end. That's the end of my rap.
Gregory, could you just walk around the whole thing so we could get a 360-degree view? Even if some of it is enshadowed, I mean, that's just perfect, I suppose.
And when you come back around, Gregory, there's one more thing I want to show. This is kind of fun. Okay, if you come around this way, Gregory, please. Behind the icon of the ancestral figurine, the household god, appeared the mental function hidden behind the mask, but the mental function appeared as this quite rational shape of the two, and this is giving rise to a thought. And this is a thought.
John, do you have any light you can turn on? Oh, yeah, that works. There we go.
How about the sun?
Yeah.
So there's a thought, and then there's sort of a winged something happening with the thought, as there is a winged something happening here. And I'm very grateful that that appeared, that this appeared behind them. The mask is quite formidable. I'm not attracted to it. My sculptures are not made to be attractive. They're not made to be ugly, but I think sometimes they are and need to be. Now, the whole personal history, again, I'm going to stop talking here because we can do some questions. The personal history of how I got into all this process, and this is with me every day. I feel very infantile. In fact, sometimes I feel sort of utterly regressive, that I have not moved much beyond my sandbox and my toys. But what's wrong with that, really? What's wrong with being close to my sandbox? It was a safe place for me. And I certainly had toys that helped me get along. I mean, that's sort of an ideal toy, isn't it? A toy that helps one move along. And I also worked with my father a lot, and he was a craftsman. And I could go into much more psychobiography there, but I won't. But at any rate, there's a continuity here, Gary, with my father, very direct. He restored things. He restored antiques, metal. He didn't create things. And I think when I was in his shop and I worked in his shop, it was, this is great, restoring things, but I want to make new things, like playing with a toy. I want to build a new structure. But then my father, he was standing in the tradition with my great-grandfather, after whom I am named. And my great-grandfather was a blacksmith. And my father said he would watch him smithing, and he was absolutely captivated by the magic of working with metal. I'm not afraid of metal. I don't work with metal because I don't know how to create with metal much. There are metal components in some of these pieces, particularly when strength is needed. There we go. I turn to my father for his strength of metallurgy. But that's enough on the personal thing. I think I should stop there and see if anybody has any questions, and then we want to take a break before Mike gets going. And maybe there are no questions. That's okay. Or maybe there are only questions.
Well, I'd like to make a comment, if I might. I like your sculptures a lot, John. I really do. And they remind me of an artist that I'd known here in Mexico who lived in Cuernavaca, a guy by the name of John Spencer, who was a very eccentric Englishman who was cousin, not too distant cousin of Lady Diane Spencer. But he came to Mexico many, many years ago. He's passed away now. But he did a whole series of sculptures in metal, which in the sense that they fit together the way yours do, it's just wonderful. That's the only other, you're the only other artist I've known that I've ever seen who did that, who put these pieces together in that way. It's wonderful. I really enjoy it very much. Thank you so much for this presentation of that piece. I like that piece a lot.
Thank you, Robert. These are, in their ways, they're three-dimensional, but I should say four-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
Four-dimensional jigsaw puzzles. You can put them together.
John, you're right. The presentation was just a work of art. I mean, you guys you did a wonderful job on it. And just to see all the pieces and parts, I know during some of our Thursday night conferences, you'd be just kind of sitting there working on something. And I said, what the heck is he doing? And it's just really inspiring. I really appreciate it, John. Thank you.
Wow. I mean, what a powerful piece that is. And I mean, with you saying, oh, I don't know if it's beautiful or, I mean, it's gorgeous. I mean, just the intricacies of it, the way it fits together, the symbolism inherent in the various layerings of it. I don't know. I'm just kind of blown away, really, John. And I guess it's extraordinary. And I'm just wondering, I mean, oh my gosh, I would personally, I mean, I would decorate my whole house around it. I would find out where it belonged in the house, and then it's like, okay, now what goes around this thing? And so I guess my question for you is, it's out there in the garage, and it feels like such a powerful piece that is such an integral part of your being and your soul. I don't know. I mean, is there an intention to put it in the house?
Oh no. I have a few pieces of sculpture on display out in the world, but I don't know what's going to happen with all of these. Again, I keep working on them. I appreciate what you're saying. I mean, some of them would really be, if I showed you more of the work, would really be quite. Yes, right. You'd have to build a space around the sculpture to just balance the energies, just very plain, practical things. The energies would need to be balanced.
Yeah.
That's really nothing particularly esoteric, but then again, I guess it's also esoteric.
Am I on?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It has a lot of what you would call resonances, but two come to mind. I think of David's presentation of the alchemy with all the images, and there's some of the winged quality and the flame quality that was in those images that David went through last year. Or was it this year? Yeah, it was this year. It reminds me of that. And the other thing that I don't know why this particular comes to mind, but Flaubert had a story in which there was an artist. You probably know this story, but the artist was an older man, and he had an unfinished painting, a painting that could never be finished. He kept adding to it, and it became, to people's eyes, all the more strange because abstract art was never thought about. It was never conceived in Flaubert's time. And so this incrustation of art and beauty kept transforming. And when it was viewed finally, out of all of this abstraction came the image of a perfect foot. It was a female foot, but it was absolutely perfect, and it made everything shine. And so those are the things that I thought about in this extremely rich sculpture, more than a sculpture that you've done. Are you there?
Yeah, namaste. I'm with you. I have begun a new sculpture, which has to do with appearance, with a beatific vision, shall we say. We can start with a foot. Let's start.
Len, did you have something to say?
I did, but I see lots of people unmuted, so I thought maybe Mike, but yeah, that's a beautiful thoughts coming from the group. Yeah, like you said before, something is afoot. So I was pretty blown away by it and still trying to process. I mean, I've always known that you're a creative soul, John, but now I thank you for the glimpse inside your unique and intricate process, and it's pretty magnificent. I guess I have one question, because you started out saying that the top is a kachina. Now and eventually you identify the piece as an ancestral figurine after playing with household god. Kachina being a Hopi word, though they're in the Hopi tradition, they keep their kachina, they don't ground the kachina. So the kachina is, hung on a wall. Did it remain, when you start to ground that, the energies, was it still a kachina plus to you?
I say kachina with all respect. Yes, I also just recently saw Jung's kachina collect. Jung actually brought kachinas back from Taos to Switzerland. For me, again, I'm moving on impulse, instinct, and often in a state of high anxiety, if panic. I deal with sort of a chronic background panic about our world. So working with the sculpture allows me to channel these energies, and it helps keep me personally sane. And then how anybody looks at the sculpture and perceives it as either sane or insane, I don't know, and I can't take responsibility for that. But for me, it was necessary for the grounding, yes. At one phase in my work, it became very hard for me to make any sculpture that wasn't grounded on its own. I have some pieces that, you would have to set them on a table or hang them on a wall. Some of them hang on a wall, high relief. But the grounding, and to say, as I already said, a grounding through hell to make it, plain enough. My journey required and has required, by whatever mythos one might wish to express it. But for me, it's not only a matter of expressing a framing, it's the reality of feeling the flames and working. So working with time is also includes working with flames, and it includes working with serpent power. So there, the grounding was important for me. Yeah.
Thank you. Beautiful.
All righty. Well, we're at 11:18. Mike is due to.
Can I ask one more thing before we change people? John, can I just ask one more question?
By all means.
But it's so interesting to me because you know, when you write, like I've had the great privilege, as many of us have, of hearing your beautiful epic poems or writings that you do. And so, and you know, and as I look at this sculpture and your sculptures that you create, they seem like, you know, there's an essence of Johnness that goes through these sculptures that I also feel is the same kind of essence in your epic writings. And so I wanted to ask you about that. If you're like in your creative process with these sculptures, as compared to when you're writing something that's rather epic in nature, how that you know, how that plays out in you, if there's similarities or differences, like how is that for you?
The answer is yes, absolutely, totally. So then let me show you one last thing and then I'll get off, but it just happens to be a sculpture that speaks in direct response to your question. You know, one thing I have to deal with is the Baptist preacher in me. You know, have hated that preacher, truly hated. Hatred, to be honest. And it's good to be honest when one can. I was just thinking today, you know, denial is a form of lying, isn't it? We have the term denial, but we could just say lying. Anyway, but I then somebody told me once, in fact, in New York City, and said, John, just cut loose. You know, if you got to preach, just get it done, get it over with, and we'll go to lunch. Come over.
We'll go to lunch.
Gregory, can you do it? Where are we? Okay. If you can pan down, tilt down and get the base.
We're not seeing the GoPro feed. We're still seeing the computer camera.
If you could come around here. Yeah, this will just take a minute. Because it just responds directly to Jesse's statement.
Great.
I think I already responded to adequately. Okay. Yeah, right. Very good. So this piece is evolved newer than the ancestral figurine and is related to it. And you can see the base here and more of the tree of life. But it's also a flame, a pillar of flame. And then we have here, then appears a mirror. And we have these flames coming out of the side, which are also sort of like the hands of extrapolation, or that's not the right word, but it sounds good. And then this piece had this mask. And I would say, you know, and so if we look here, it's a mirror, and I have to see myself in that mirror. But once again, if you look behind it, there's flames, there's more, and then there's this mask, which also to me was quite frightening and sort of awful. And my granddaughter said, it looks like a lion to me.
Yeah.
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 It does.
I said, oh my God. Thank you, granddaughter.